First of all, to state the obvious, I'm very honored to be the recipient of this award and deeply grateful to all my friends who are here tonight to celebrate with me. And my particular thanks to Paul and Mort for their kind and generous words. I have to tell you that I met John Gardner once. I was sitting outside the office of Joe Califano, I think it was in 1965. He was here tonight, he'd been a friend of 50 years. And John Gardner was the secretary of HEW at the time, and he was sitting there as well, complaining about the fact that Califano kept him waiting too many times. I said, you know, I was much younger than he, and I introduced myself, and we chatted for a couple of minutes, and finally, Joe quite probably saw Secretary Gardner before he invited me into his office. And I always admired Gardner, and I remember so many things that he said or wrote, but one of them has a particular meaning to me in light of the experiences I've had, and that is, he said that the difference between adults and children, I may not remember this literally, was that we are responsible for all the consequences of what we do and say, not just the ones we intend. And that always stuck with me over the years. And as I've participated in, hopefully, in very useful changes and things in this society, and wrote the first public campaign finance law for the city of New York, I've always been very mindful of the fact that there were always unintended consequences to some of the things one did. And one wondered whether, to what extent, a lot of the reforms that I am proud to have been part of, what did they actually accomplish in terms of making the world a better place? And I thought about that a lot with great intensity in the last year and a half. I was in Albany yesterday and presided over the New York State Senate for a few minutes. That's not an example of how government works well. And such has been the case all year, and I've thought about these things a great deal. I am a passionate believer in public campaign financing. I think that it is not that money is per se evil. It is that in state and local government, the influence of money is too important in relation to the other influences that affect the choices and the decisions that people make. I'm not against lobbying. I'm against at all. I think that's a constitutional right. It's intrinsic to making a democracy work. I believe in full disclosure, but I think if campaigns were financed through public programs, it doesn't prevent all abuses, and it certainly cannot, in light of a Supreme Court decision, preclude people of great wealth from subverting the values of public campaign financing. But in terms of legislative elections, it's critically important. I think that in all other respects, all proposed reforms got to be looked at very honestly in the context of be careful what you wish for. To me, coming out of the experience of the last year and a half, I have to tell you that the fundamental problem is that politics is not an attractive endeavor for the bright young people in this society. First of all, they've had unbelievable opportunities to do other things, including public service. For people to go into politics today and be the subject of the obloquy with which they're treated almost with regularity, not always undeservedly, by the media, there are more column inches devoted to the couple of really bad people in politics compared to the number of the amount of attention that's given to things like a $10 billion budget deficit. That's barely a major story. The disincentives, and I don't want to make a long speech, but I can't underestimate how serious the disincentives are for young people to go into politics. We don't have political parties that mean anything anymore. I know some reformers rejoice in that. I regret it. I think we had better candidates when we had bosses. They had a way of bringing people up through the political system, assuring them of some continuity and some higher reward if they conduct themselves in a proper and good fashion. I believe that we better pay attention to whether or not the compensation in public service is competitive in order to attract the best and the brightest. We cannot, as some Tea Party advocates say, readjust the way our society functions and eliminate the necessity of having a government that functions in almost every aspect of our economic life, whether it's the administration of justice or whether it's the redistribution of the wealth that we create in this society. This takes talented, honest people. Public service has got to be, and politics have got to be matters of pride. We have to look at the people who are willing to do this. And it's obviously the end of my career, and I'm not talking about, obviously, myself, but we have to worry about how we're going to induce people to be willing to devote their lives to this. I don't know how many of you have ever been to Albany. Not a place that you would want your kid to spend 6 months a year at for $75,000 compensation. And don't forget that as you think of all kinds of remedies about how you're going to make this society better. And second of all, understand, which I think most of you do, and as Paul said, we're facing a totally different economic paradigm than we have ever faced before in this country. It's changed. The political paradigm hasn't yet. It's going through convolutions. So you have aberrational things like the lunatics in the Tea Party. But if you know your history, you know that right-wing populism often can become left-wing populism. You have 41 million Americans on food stamps today. You have a political system that not only in Albany is it dysfunctional, but in Washington it's dysfunctional. And how this political system is going to adjust to this fundamentally changed economic paradigm is, I think, the challenge that all of us have to face. I sure don't know the answer, but I do know this, that quite understandably, people have gotten elected to office historically by offering people whose votes they seek more benefits. That has been the very nature of democracy. And if we've really reached the point in our history where we have made commitments to generate benefits that we no longer have the economic resources to pay for, it's changed the whole fundamental nature of the political equation. So how can you expect somebody to run for office and say, we're going to be for cuts and we're going to be for taxes? It's not a formula that's likely to get anybody elected. And yet there isn't a sane, rational person who understands the choices that we have that doesn't recognize that we're going to have to cut benefits we're going to have to cut public expenditures, and we're going to have to raise taxes, because in a democracy, everybody's got to put skin in the game if we're going to solve problems with this kind of complexity. And that means a whole different political universe, a whole different dialogue, language with which politics has got to be spoken. And that's really the challenge if we're going to address our problems. So reform doesn't mean just changing process. You can have every minister and clergyman in this state redraw the districts, and that doesn't mean you'll get anybody worth a ticker's damn to run for office. And that's what I urge you, as you quite honestly, openly, and importantly seek to make this society a better place, a fairer place. Bear in mind that we are not likely to succeed unless we're able to get smarter people, better people, to give up a lot of things to be able to afford to be able to enter politics and be successful in it. And unless there is a critical mass that's willing to do that and willing to tell the public, you have only a choice picking between arsenic and strychnine. There are no happy choices out there given the problems. When the business community stops complaining about taxes, which are at the lowest rate in our history, when the unions recognize that they can't not petition the political system to confer more and better benefits when we can't afford the ones that we've already legislated, until that happens, we got a tough nut, but we won't get over that hurdle until there are people in politics willing to put their political lives on the line to tell the public the truth about this. You can change the process, you can change the mechanisms, you can write all the rules that you want to write, but until there are people willing to go into politics in enough critical mass to tell the truth to the public, we will not change what is most critically troubling to the well-being of this society. Anyway, I've talked longer than I intended to. I deeply appreciate your award and wish your organization, Common Cause, Godspeed and good luck, and I look forward to joining you with better events. Thank you very much.